on BookTube is doing these like cool ranking videos, and I'm sure by the time I'm posting this, no one on BookTube is going to be doing ranking videos anymore. But I struggled for a week to think of how I could bring the ranking video into Authortube, because I thought that would be cool. And Tibuggy did do a ranking video. I'm gonna link their video below, but did a ranking video, and I was like, I want to do a ranking video, but I hadn't quite thought of what I wanted to do, and I finally had an idea. So today I'm ranking writing advice from popular authors, and going to stipulate first that this is my opinion on writing advice from famous authors. You are very welcome to disagree with me. In fact, I encourage you, if you disagree, to disagree with me and share your thoughts in the comments. This is just like my personal opinions on this ranking, and I thought it would be kind of fun to do this and join that ranking video. Whatever, I don't know why I do that. Anyway, ranking video. So let's start. This is how this is gonna work. I'm going to read the quote from the author. I'm gonna put it somewhere on the screen probably, and then I will rank it accordingly, and then I'll talk a bit about why I ranked it that way. So let's go ahead. First quote: work on a computer that is disconnected from the internet, from Zadie Smith. I did find these quotes on the internet. I am assuming they are accurate. If they are not, feel free to come for me in the comments, but these seem to be like direct quotes from people. So this one is interesting. So first I'll rank it and then I'll talk about it. So this one I'm gonna put in could do. This is my ranking, by the way. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not gonna get into it. So one, I guess it's easy to disconnect your computer from the internet, but sometimes you need the internet for research purposes. But I know a lot of people who will, for example, disconnect from social media or like block social media sites when they're writing so that it helps them focus. I'm not one of those people. I just set a timer and I'm like, okay, don't do other stuff while you are supposed to be writing during this time. And then I just do it. But I know that doesn't work for everyone. Some people need to have that disconnection in order to focus and actually like get their work done. So for me, this advice is kind of like, do you need to go that hard? But you could do it. You could do it. If it works for you, go ahead. The second quote is, if you don't have time to read, you don't have the time or the tools to write. Simple as that, from Stephen King. So this advice, I'm actually going to rank in highly recommend. I highly recommend Stephen King's advice. Don't always agree with what he says on Twitter, but this I think is really, really good advice. And I know people always want to point to the shiny unicorn and be like, but this person's a really successful author, and I heard they don't read books at all, or they don't read any books in their age category or their genre. But I think that's unicorn behavior, and I don't think that applies to the rest of us. I think you really need to read in your age category and your genre, especially like for traditional publishing. One, so that you know what's out there. You should know what books are already being published and sold and bought by publishers. You should know what sort of stories are already out there as well. You should know what sort of stories people are maybe like have been done and dusted that maybe you can spin on its heel or do something completely different with. You should also be reading them for your own research to understand what's kind of working in the market and like what sort of stories and what sort of techniques that you like that maybe you can implement in your own craft. I think it is very, very important for your own research to read books that are out there, because otherwise I think you're just gonna be walking in like very ignorant to the industry and to the books that are out there. And especially like if you're querying or participating in pitch contests, it's really important to know what books are out there that are like your own. For one, those agents might represent those books, and then you know that agent may be a good fit for you, or that they may be stocked up on those because they have so many authors represented on that. You can say comparison titles so that you can give agents a quick better idea of what your book is about, because you can say my book is similar to this book and this book. So I think this is really good advice that I would highly recommend for sure. If there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. Toni Morrison. I am going to rank this, I'm sure because of my face you can already tell. Highly recommend. I highly recommend this advice because for me, this is really a lot of how I put stories out into the world. There is a story that I want to see and it's not there yet. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'll write it, because otherwise what am I going to do? If I was like, and I owned an IP packager, like a book packager, if I was like Cake Literary and I could write up the idea I really want and find an author and have them write it for me, that would be awesome too. But a lot of us won't have access to that. But though that is why IP is great for that reason. But to me, I think some of the best books that come out are when you see a gap for a story that you really want to see in the world, and then you fill that gap. And especially for your own kind of passion that makes you feel passionate about the story, you know. I don't know if you can tell, I keep accidentally hitting my snake plant and it's very annoying, so I can't use my hands anymore. This is like a new filming angle and it's already not working for me, but I have to face my computer. So anyway, highly recommend. This is the next quote. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader, from Robert Frost. Oh my gosh. I am going to rank this as could do. I mean, and so this is why. This is like a two-parter. So the no tears in the reader, no tears in the writer. I think if you cry yourself in a scene, then that's at least like a good indicator that like probably it's highly emotional. Maybe somebody else will cry. So I think that's pretty good. That on itself, I think is good. But I also think there are lots of times where like a writer could be writing something and they won't cry, but somebody else will cry. I just think that's how emotion works. And same with surprises. Like if you're like me and you're a plotter, I pretty much know everything that's gonna happen. Sometimes I'll surprise myself and something will pop up that I didn't expect, and it'll be like a really good thread and it'll work really well in the book. I don't know if that means it's surprising to the reader. I think this is a weird could do, because I think if you cry and you are surprised, then that's a good indication that those are things, that those are things that would maybe make a reader get really excited or cry, but I don't think it's a guarantee. And I don't think that because you didn't cry or you didn't get surprised, that means that the reader, essentially I think what this quote is saying is like, if you don't have emotion for the scene, the reader isn't gonna have emotion for the scene. And I don't know that I believe in that, like kind of, because I think if you do have emotion for the scene, that's a good indication that the reader could probably have emotion for the scene. But I think if you don't, then like whatever, like not everybody's an empath, I'm sorry. Next quote. You must stay drunk on writing so reality cannot destroy you, from Ray Bradbury. I was like, I think, this is so hard. Stay drunk on writing. I think I have to think about it, because I'm like, what does this even mean? Like, what does this mean? I guess like you gotta like escape into writing and like really like write your truth so that reality can't destroy you. I don't know. I'm sorry. Toss it in the trash. Toss it in the trash. I'm sorry. I think I just don't get it, but in some ways I guess it also seems like too high and mighty, like the idea that you could take so like that you could so express, that you could be so enthralled with your writing that reality, that therefore you're so enthralled in your writing that reality can't impose and crush upon you. And I think maybe that was like one thing for a guy like Ray Bradbury to say, but I think that's like a very different reality for people that are like marginalized. Like you can't just ignore reality. I don't really know. I think maybe I just don't understand what this quote is trying to tell me. If you do, by all means, explore it in the comments. But to me, I don't know. I think it just speaks to, I guess, escapism writing. But like, I also think when anyone talks about like trying to ignore reality, it seems a little privileged. So I'm sorry, not for me. Don't bend, don't water it down, don't try and make it logical, don't edit your own soul according to the fashion. Rather, follow your most intense obsessions mercilessly, from Franz Kafka. And so this one, I'm actually gonna put in highly recommend. When I first read this quote, I was like, what is he talking about? Like, is he like saying don't edit your work? And I don't know why I thought that at first, because it's obviously not saying that. But I just read this and I was like, this is like so, there's too much stuff in this. And I felt sure that I was going to say throw this in the trash. But I actually do highly recommend this, because I think what this quote is saying is to write what you're most obsessive and passionate about and kind of throw everything else out the window. Don't try and water it down. Don't try and make it like something else. And I think this is really important, because I think we talk about, in traditional publishing, we talk about market and like being aware of market and like some things that it's like, oh, you just won't be able to sell this. But sometimes you can. Sometimes people are like, you know, you can't sell dystopian, and then someone sells a sci-fi that kind of reads like dystopian. Or I was told you can't sell genre mix, and then I sold a genre mix. I think there's a different journey for you, and it may be harder, but I also think that when you don't write the story that you are most passionate about, then it just, you can't write it, you know? It makes it difficult for you to write. Does that story always need to be seen by the world? I don't know that necessarily. I think it's also important to pay attention to things like the story that you're most obsessive and passionate about may like actually be like a problematic story maybe. In which case it's like, oh, maybe that doesn't need to see the light of day. But without getting kind of bogged down in that, I think at the heart of it, like the story that you are most obsessive and passionate about is a story that you should write without trying to water it down or cater to other people, at least when you are in that stage of just writing your story. When you are getting to the stage of like showing it to people, that's a whole other thing. But I think if you don't write the story you're most passionate about, then it makes it really difficult for you. And in this specific case, it also makes me think about like marginalized writers who worry about like, is my story too this or too that, or like, is my story too black, or is it too queer, or is it too this thing, where you worry that your marginalizations might make your book a tougher sell. I like this quote in that way of not watering it down and not bending and not compromising your identity to fit the market, and just writing what you're most passionate about, because sometimes that just really ends up being the thing that comes out. So that's why I like this. So I'm gonna say highly recommend. Writing is like sex. First you do it for love, then you do it for your friends, and then you do it for money, by Virginia Woolf. So I'm just gonna, just real quick, just throw it in the trash. I'm sorry. What is this quote? I found this. I don't know if this is like not a real quote. Please call me out in the comments. But I found this and I was like, what? Like, okay, like, first of all, I don't know that people first have sex for love all the time necessarily. I don't think that's always the case. Some people don't have sex at all or desire to, and then like, first you do it for your friends. What does that mean? Like, you just have sex with all your friends, or like you're somehow having sex for, like, it's to the benefit of your friends, and then you do it for money? What? Like, not all of us are sex workers. There's nothing wrong with being a sex worker, but that's not the reality for everyone. It was just weird. It was just like a bad simile. This is just a bad simile. I don't know why people always seem to want to do this like comparison of blank is just like sex and and I don't, yeah. I guess like if you're just saying first writing you do for love and then writing you do for your friends and then writing you do for money, I guess that's one thing, but I don't know. This whole quote, throw it in the trash. I'm sorry, Virginia Woolf. She doesn't care. Next quote. First, forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. Habit will help you finish and polish your stories. Inspiration won't. Habit is persistence in practice. From Octavia Butler. And I'm going to highly recommend this. I highly recommend it. Why am I so extreme? I either like highly recommend, toss it in the trash, or like just the middle, but none of the in-between ones so far. Anyway, I highly recommend this because, especially for traditional publishing, I just feel like persistence and habit get you so much farther than inspiration or like your idea, like the high concept idea or whatever. And so that's really what I think is good here. And I also think inspiration, like waiting for inspiration, like, or like trying to have inspiration fuel you, can be really difficult. I'm sure there are some people that write like that, but I personally feel like you get a lot farther with habit and with persistence. Like if I waited for any time I felt inspired to write, I would probably take way longer to get things done. I certainly would never win NaNoWriMo. But because I set habits, because I'm like, this is my word count goal for the day or the week or the month or whatever, that's why I get stuff done. Because almost every time I sit down to write, I'm not feeling inspired to write, but I make the habit, I sit down, and then once I start writing, then I feel really inspired, I feel really energized, I go and like, I get the writing done. But the fact of the matter is I'm just like lazy, and I think a lot of people are also lazy, and the idea of just being propelled to do something extra just by the gumption of inspiration is like not gonna get you as far as having a habit and being persistent. I think that'll get you a lot farther, especially in traditional publishing where you can have so many downs, you can have so much rejection that can really kill your inspiration. Being fueled by that only, I think would really make it difficult. Though I will say when I'm really inspired by something, I'll do a lot more. Like yesterday, I had felt really inspired to plot my horror, and I did way more work on it than I probably would have done on any regular day, and so that was awesome. But if I had just waited for that, I probably wouldn't have done work for like a month. That would have been like only my second day of work. So highly recommend this. If you're using dialogue, say it aloud as you write it. Only then will it have the sound of speech. From John Steinbeck. Pretty good. Yeah, that's where I'm gonna put it. So I'm putting it here because it's kind of a back and forth. Like, to me, the idea of going through, like, my debut is 140,000 words. Going through 140,000 words and reading every single piece of dialogue to make sure it sounds like a real person, ridiculous. Would never do it. Would never recommend it. But I also think it's really helpful, especially when you are maybe a newer writer starting out, to say your dialogue aloud every once in a while to make sure that you're not stumbling over stuff and to think about the way that people actually talk. Writing is weird because you can't actually, this is also another thing with this quote, you can't write dialogue exactly the way that people talk. Because people say and ah, and they trail off and they get interrupted and they don't finish sentences, and like there's all sorts of things that people do when they talk naturally that you would never put in a book. Like when I do my captions for these videos, that is something I would never write in dialogue because I say like every 2 seconds. So that's the sound of real speech, but you would never put that into dialogue. You cut out all the ums, you cut out a lot of the trailing out unless it is made for dramatic effect. You cut out the likes, you cut out the so's, those sorts of things. But there are also certain ways to think of dialogue when you're doing it. For example, a lot of people will do this. They'll say, like, they'll be talking to a character. Say they're talking to me and they'll be like, well, what are we going to do now, Liselle? Nobody would say that in real life. If you were talking directly to my face, you would never say my name. You would just say, well, what are we going to do now? Because I'm already there in front of you. What's the point in saying my name? Whereas in words, for some reason, it feels acceptable because you're not necessarily visually seeing that character in that way. So I find that's something that a lot of people do, and that's the sort of thing where if you said that out loud, you would probably be like, oh, that's kind of weird. I don't know that I would say it that way. And so I think in that case, it's really good to say your dialogue out loud. I just think you'll eventually get to a point in craft where you'll become so aware of those dialogue conventions that you'll just do that naturally, and you won't need to go through and like say every piece of dialogue aloud. And maybe that's not what John Steinbeck meant. Maybe he didn't mean to read every single piece of dialogue aloud. Maybe he just meant like every once in a while, exactly like I'm saying. But anyway, pretty good. I don't know about lying for novelists. I look at some of the great novelists and I think that the reason they are great is they're telling the truth, from Maya Angelou. So I feel like, I'm like, is this video too positive because I recommend too many things? But I actually have like a fairly good spread out. Anyway, highly recommend. I'm sorry that this video is so positive, ? But I really do recommend this advice because, so this is kind of a two-parter. I don't think this is necessarily writing what you know. So when people say like, write what you know, write your truth, and that sort of thing, I don't necessarily think that what this is saying, but I think there can be a broader arching truth that you are writing about. And so I think especially when you think of characters and their internal motivations, a lot of them are like really commonplace. It's things like wanting to be accepted by other people. It's things like learning how to trust other people. Things like trying to find a place where you belong. Like those are really universal truths. And I think when you as a writer connect to that truth, it makes for a much better story, because then I find that comes out in the character. And maybe it doesn't, because I don't know what's going on in people's heads. So maybe somebody is like, sure, they're like, they want to find a place to belong, but I don't really care about that. I've always belonged somewhere. But I do think there's something to be said about leading with that, and leading with finding that universal truth for your story, and leading with that for your character to kind of help strengthen the story and how that all comes together. So I think this is really good advice. You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club, from Jack London. So this one, I'm gonna go with could do. When I first found this quote, I really felt like I was gonna be like, highly recommend. Highly recommend. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, could do. And this is why. For me, I can come up with story ideas without trying. It's just the way I am. And you can check out the video over here. I did an In Conversation video with Elora Cook where we talked about coming up with new ideas and how to come up with new ideas for story and how to find inspiration. So if you're wanting like help with that or wanting to learn more about that, definitely check out that video. But for me, a lot of inspiration happens without any effort on my part. I have never been for lack of story ideas. I've always had stuff kind of inspire me off the cuff, things that seem like nothing. The other day I got inspired for a brand new horror that I like love. I'm so in love with this idea. I need to get a chance to plot it. But I thought about it and I just loved it right away. And I can't even remember what inspired it. I literally cannot even remember. But it came into my head and that was just it. And I had a fully fledged book idea. And a lot of the time that's how my ideas come. I don't have to work for inspiration because it just happens naturally. But this isn't the way for everyone. And so for me, originally I was like, yeah, you gotta go after inspiration. If you're not inspired, I don't know, you gotta find some way to be inspired. You gotta like dig at it. You gotta just work really hard on it. But I think for some people that's really just not their creative process. In fact, I think that really digging for inspiration can kind of be detrimental to them and can really kind of make the fire go out on writing. And so that's why I say could do, because I think for some people this works really well, and for other people this is maybe not the greatest idea. Like, yeah, I've never lacked for ideas, but I think if I brainstormed for like 2 seconds, I could come up with a huge amount of ideas and I'd be so happy, but not everybody is like that. So that's why I say could do. This is the last quote. So, right. If you want to do sports, you train every day. Nobody sees the training. Nobody cares much about the training. But if you don't do it, you are not prepared for the competition. It's the same as a writer. You have to write every day. From Isabella Allende. So, this one, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it in the trash. Throw it in the trash. Throw it right in that trash. So I will preface this by saying Isabella Allende is like a really fantastic writer. In high school, we read House of Spirits from her. It blew me away. Like a great magical realism, like Latinx writer. That story, I can't even remember what blew me away about it anymore, but it did. And that's what matters. But like this advice, throw it right in the trash. I think there's kind of this school of people that are like, you have to write every day. And so far, anytime I see anyone talk about it on Authortube, they disagree. So I'm confused about how this even became a convention in the first place. But to me, the idea that you have to write every day is wild. It's wild because that means every single day you have to turn your brain on to writing. And I think that people are like, oh, well, if you love it, wouldn't you be happy to write every day? Yeah, I love donuts. I wouldn't eat donuts every single day. Even if there was no, like, you know, repercussions of me developing a heart condition from the overflow of sugar. But it's just, even if you love something, sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you need a time to just do nothing and just like chill and watch Netflix and Disney Plus or whatever it is that you have, and just turn your brain off. Because the idea that you have to have your brain on every single day and like the pressure of having to write every day is a lot. I think if I tried to write every day, there would be days where I didn't want to write, that I'd sat down and like maybe I'd write 50 words and I'd be like, wonderful, I feel great. But I also know I would never be like that, and I would have some sort of like ridiculous amount of words I had to hit every day, and if I didn't hit it, I would feel guilty and I would feel really bad about myself. And I feel like that's something that comes along with this convention of you have to write every day, that it gets caught up in like, you get caught up in feelings of like anxiety and like guilt and pressure, and all that stuff comes along with it, and all that stuff is not good, and all that stuff is like not worth just being able to say that you write every day, or you know what I mean? I think there's some good things in this quote, like the top thing that she's talking about, you know, people that do sports train. I think people do care about the training. I think that's something they're interested in, at least from when like I've watched the Olympics and they've done exposés. Oh, I'm sad for the Olympics. But when I've watched the Olympics, they've done like exposés on the athletes and they talk about all the stuff they did to train. I am actually interested in that. But anyway, I think there's something to be said of the habit. I just think that like, who did that quote? Octavia Butler. I just think Octavia Butler put it better in habit. And I think that's really what this write every day is trying to get at. It's trying to get at forming a habit. But I think the idea of saying you have to write every day is really kind of damaging, especially when it comes from really well-versed authors, because I think then it can feel like, well, if I'm not writing every day, am I not keeping up with the greats? Am I never going to reach that level because I don't do this every day? And yeah, I just think writing every day it's not a thing. I don't think. Throw it right in the trash. And I also think I'm like going on for too long right now, and I can tell I'm going on for too long, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I feel like the idea of writing every day has its own innate privilege, because a lot of the time the people that are saying write every day are really famous, really established authors. And I'm like, of course you can write every day. This is your whole job. But like people that are like parents that have like multiple children that have to like come home and like get their whole life together and like take care of and nurture their children on top of their full-time job, on top of like taking their kids to like hobbies and sports, on top of like maintaining their own hobbies and sports, and like wanting to read and doing all that and being like, yeah, you just gotta pigeonhole in time to write every day, feels so high horse that I just don't like it. And that's not shade on Isabel Allende, who I think is wonderful. That's just like, to me, the idea of writing every day just feels a little bit privileged, and I don't think you need to do that. And I think a lot of people are successful without writing every day. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please share any of your thoughts on any of these quotes in the comment below. You are welcome to disagree with me. You are welcome to agree with me. I'd love to hear your opinions on any of these quotes. Like, I'm really excited for people to jump in with their own thoughts, so definitely do. If you haven't subscribed already, you can subscribe down below. I talk about my experience in traditional publishing, giving like a bit of advice based on my own experiences, and then sometimes I do videos about books and sometimes I do Sims 4 videos. And so if you subscribe, you can see all of those. And thank you so much for watching this video. Bye!